The Kepler 442 system materialized around the human fleet like a vision from hell. Commander Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as the Prometheus shuddered through the final moments of quantum transition, her experienced eyes taking in the nightmare that surrounded them. Where stellar surveys had indicated a normal star system, they found chaos. The primary star pulsed with unnatural rhythms, its surface crawling with dark energy that seemed to devour light itself. 3 of the system's 5 planets had been reduced to asteroid fields that orbited in impossible patterns, defying every law of physics Sarah knew. "Radiation levels are beyond critical," reported Dr. Vasquez, her voice tight with disbelief. "Whatever's happening here is rewriting the fundamental forces of this system." "Our shielding is holding, but barely." Lieutenant Torres suddenly straightened at his station, his face pale. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Multiple contacts, but they're not showing up on visual or thermal scans. It's like they exist in dimensions we can't fully perceive." Sarah felt her predator instincts kick in, honed by evolution on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. Battle stations? Signal retribution in New Geneva to maintain formation, but keep engines hot for emergency jump. The bridge lighting shifted to tactical red as klaxons echoed through the ship. Across the fleet, nearly 2,000 human crew members prepared for combat with the methodical efficiency that had made their species legendary among the stars. "Sir, I'm picking up the Zephyrian transmission source," Navigator Kim announced, bearing 27 Mark IV, approximately 400,000 kilometers. "But Commander, you need to see this." The main screen shifted to show a sight that defied comprehension. Floating in space was what appeared to be a massive crystalline structure, easily the size of a small moon. It pulsed with internal light that shifted through colors that human eyes weren't designed to process. But what drew Sarah's attention were the wounds carved into its surface, gouges that looked like claw marks from some unimaginable predator. "My God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "That's not a ship. That's a Zephyrian city mind. They've uploaded their entire civilization into crystalline matrices. The damage we're seeing represents thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and culture being destroyed." Sarah studied the alien construct, noting how it listed through space like a wounded animal. "Can we communicate with them?" "Incoming transmission, Commander," Torres reported. "The signal is weak and degrading rapidly." The screen flickered and filled with an image that challenged human sanity. The Zephyrian who appeared was a being of pure energy, shifting between forms like liquid light. But its normally radiant presence was dimmed, and Sarah could see something that transcended species barriers. Absolute terror. "Beings of flesh and bone," the entity spoke, its voice causing harmonic resonances throughout the ship. "You should not have come. The Devourers have found us despite our precautions. They consume not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence itself." Sarah stepped forward, her command presence radiating through the communication link. "I am Commander Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress call and came to help." "What are these Devourers?" The Zephyrian's form flickered with what might have been surprise. "You came to help? Your species is known to us as the Deathworlders, but your reputation for irrational heroics preceded you across the galaxy. The Devourers are entities from outside our reality. They enter a universe, consume everything that exists, and move on. We thought our transcendence to pure energy would protect us. We were wrong." The transmission wavered as massive explosions erupted around the crystalline city. Through the static, Sarah could see things moving between the asteroids, shadows that seemed to eat light and space itself. "How long do you have?" Sarah asked. "Hours at most. Our defensive matrices are failing. When we fall, they will have consumed enough energy to tear through the barriers between realities. This universe itself will be at risk." Sarah looked around her bridge, seeing the same determination on every face that had carried humanity from the caves of Earth to the stars. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing enemies that existed beyond their understanding. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans specialized in. "All ships, this is the commander. We've got friendlies under attack by hostiles that threaten not just this system, but potentially our entire reality. The enemy feeds on energy and matter, which means traditional weapons may be ineffective. We're going to have to get creative." Captain Rodriguez of the Retribution appeared on a secondary screen. "Commander, our fighter squadrons are ready to deploy. Whatever these things are, we'll give them something to chew on." Captain Thompson from the New Geneva added. Our engineering teams have been monitoring the energy patterns. We might be able to disrupt their feeding process if we can generate the right kind of interference. Sarah nodded, her mind already forming a battle plan that would have seemed insane to any other species in the galaxy. Torres, signal the Zephyrians that help is on the way. Tell them humans don't abandon allies no matter what the odds. The first wave of devourers emerged from behind the shattered remains of the third planet, and Sarah finally got a clear look at humanity's new enemy. They were darkness given form, creatures that seemed to exist in negative space, their presence marked by the absence of everything around them. They moved through the void like predators through water, and where they passed, even the vacuum of space seemed to scream. "Ma'am, they're heading straight for the Zephyrian city," reported Kim. "Estimated contact in 40 minutes. Sarah turned to her weapons officer. "Commander Parks, what's our effective range on the kinetic cannons?" "At maximum charge, we can engage at 200,000 kilometers, but Commander, I'm not sure our weapons can affect something that exists partially outside our reality." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console with the expression of someone who had just solved an impossible equation. "Commander, I may have something. The Devourers exist by consuming the energy that binds matter together. If we could overload them with more energy than they can process, you're suggesting we feed them until they explode," Sarah said with a grim smile. "I like it. What do you need?" "All 3 ships would need to overcharge their fusion reactors simultaneously and direct the output through our defensive shields. It would essentially turn us into energy beacons that would be impossible for them to ignore." Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "Commander, that plan has one small problem. If we miscalculate the energy output, we'll detonate like miniature stars." Sarah looked out at the wounded Zephyrian city, thinking about the billions of ancient minds that would be lost if they failed. She thought about Earth, about humanity's long journey from a hostile world to the stars, and about the responsibility that came with being the galaxy's apex predators. "Gentlemen, we've faced extinction before. The difference is, this time we're not fighting for just ourselves. We're fighting for the right of consciousness to exist in this universe. If we succeed, we save not just the Zephyrians, but potentially every thinking being in our reality." The Devourers were accelerating now, their hunger driving them toward the feast of energy that the crystalline city represented. Sarah could feel the weight of impossible odds settling around her like a familiar cloak. "All ships prepare to overcharge reactors on my mark. We're going hunting." The battle began before Sarah could give the order. The lead devourer reached the Zephyrian city mind and the universe screamed. Reality warped around the point of contact, space itself bending inward as the entity began feeding. The crystalline structure, which had weathered millennia of existence, started dissolving at the molecular level. "Reactor overcharge in progress," reported Chief Engineer Martinez over the comm from deep in the Prometheus's belly. "Commander, these readings are off the charts. We're pushing fusion containment beyond anything in the manuals." Sarah watched the tactical display as her 3 ships accelerated toward a cluster of devourers that had broken off from the main assault. Each entity was roughly the size of a human destroyer, but they moved through space like living shadows. Their presence marked by the waylight seemed to flee from them. "Dr. Vasquez, talk to me about our energy beacon theory," Sarah called out as the ship shuddered under the strain of its overcharged systems. "The math is solid, Commander, but we're in uncharted territory. These entities feed on all forms of energy, but there should be a saturation point where they can't process anymore. Think of it like trying to drink from a fire hose." Lieutenant Torres suddenly shouted over the alarm klaxons. "Contact!" 3 devourers breaking off from the main group, heading directly for us. "They've definitely noticed our energy signature." Sarah felt a predatory smile cross her face. "Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. All ships maintain formation and continue reactor overcharge. Let's see how hungry these things really are." The first devourer reached the human formation, and the Prometheus shook as reality warped around them. Through the viewports, Sarah could see space itself bending, stars stretching into impossible spirals as the entity began to feed on their shields. "Energy output at 300% of normal," reported Martinez. 400%. 500. "Commander, we're approaching critical levels." The devourer pressed closer, its form becoming more solid as it gorged itself on the human ship's energy output. Sarah could see details now that chilled her blood. The entity wasn't just consuming energy. It was consuming the information that energy contained. Entire sections of their shield matrix were simply ceasing to exist, not destroyed but retroactively negated. 600% and climbing, Martinez called out. Hull temperature is exceeding safety parameters. Sarah gripped her command chair as the ship bucked like a living thing. Around them, space was becoming increasingly unstable as the Devourer fed, but something was wrong with the entity. Its movements were becoming erratic, less controlled. "Commander, look at this," Dr. Vasquez called out, excitement overriding fear in her voice. "The Devourer is showing signs of energy saturation. Its form is beginning to fluctuate." The alien entity suddenly convulsed, its dark form rippling like disturbed water. For a moment it seemed to stretch across multiple dimensions simultaneously, before snapping back to its original configuration. "It's working," Sarah breathed. 700% reactor output now." The Prometheus groaned as every system pushed beyond its design limits. The lights flickered and gravity fluctuated as the ship's fusion reactors poured their entire output through the shield generators. The Devourer pressed even closer, its hunger overriding whatever passed for survival instincts. Then it happened. The entity suddenly expanded, its dark form becoming transparent as excess energy overwhelmed its ability to process. For a moment, Sarah could see through it into dimensions that human minds weren't designed to perceive. The Devourer made a sound that had no analog in any human experience, a cry that seemed to echo through multiple realities simultaneously. Then it simply ceased to exist. "Target destroyed," shouted Parks from weapons control. The Devourer just disappeared, but there was no time to celebrate. 2 more entities were closing on the Retribution in New Geneva, and the main swarm was still tearing apart the Zephyrian city. Sarah could see sections of the crystalline structure going dark as ancient minds were consumed. "All ships, target the nearest Devourers. We know the tactic works now. Pour everything we have into our shield matrices and let them come to us." Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm from the Retribution. "Commander, we're at 800% reactor output and the second Devourer is beginning to show saturation effects. But we're also showing microfractures in our hull from the energy overload." Sarah made the calculation that every commander dreaded. They were burning out their ships to save an alien civilization, and there was no guarantee they would survive the process. But that was what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. They didn't calculate odds when people needed help. Continue overcharge sequence. We'll worry about hull integrity after we win this fight. The New Geneva suddenly flared like a newborn star as Captain Thompson pushed his ship's reactors to their absolute limits. The Devourer attacking his vessel convulsed and began to tear itself apart as it tried to process more energy than its alien physiology could handle. "Second entity destroyed," reported Torres. "But Commander, long-range sensors are showing more Devourers emerging from the asteroid field. Lots more." Sarah looked at the tactical display and felt her stomach drop. What they had taken for asteroids were actually cocoons, protective shells that the Devourers had spun around themselves while they waited for suitable prey. Now those cocoons were cracking open, revealing dozens of the entities. "How many?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. 47 confirmed contacts, with more emerging every minute. "Commander, at our current rate of reactor overcharge, we'll burn out our ship's systems long before we can destroy them all." Sarah studied the display, her mind racing through possibilities. The Zephyrian city mind was still under assault, its crystalline structure now showing major damage. Ancient sections that had housed entire civilizations were going dark one by one. Then she noticed something odd about the Devourers' attack pattern. They were all feeding from the same section of the city, clustering around what appeared to be the structure's core. "Dr. Vasquez, what's at the center of that Zephyrian construct?" The science officer consulted her readings, her eyes widening as she processed the data. "It's their central consciousness matrix, Commander. The core contains the combined knowledge and memories of their entire species spanning millions of years. If the Devourers consume that, they'll have enough energy to break through to other realities," Sarah finished. "Torres, get me a direct line to the Zephyrian consciousness. I need to talk to them now." The alien entity appeared on screen again, but its form was noticeably dimmer than before. "Commander Chen, your ships have destroyed 3 of the entities, but there are too many. We are preparing to initiate our final protocol." "What kind of protocol?" "We will collapse our consciousness matrix and create a controlled singularity. It will destroy us, but it should take most of the Devourers with us and prevent them from reaching other realities." Sarah felt her jaw clench. "How long before you activate this protocol?" 30 minutes at most. Our outer defensive layers are failing rapidly. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were humans who had earned their place among the stars through determination and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. They had found a way to fight entities from outside reality itself, and they weren't about to let an ancient civilization sacrifice itself on their watch. Zephyrians. Hold that protocol. We're going to try something that's either brilliant or completely insane. What do you have in mind, Commander? Asked Captain Rodriguez. Sarah's smile was predatory and completely human. We're going to feed every single devourer in this system more energy than they've ever dreamed of. All at once. Sarah's plan was madness by any reasonable standard, which made it perfectly human. Listen carefully, she told the combined crews over the fleet communication system. We're going to synchronize a controlled overload of all 3 ships' reactors. Not enough to destroy us, but enough to create an energy pulse that will saturate every devourer in this system simultaneously. Chief Engineer Martinez's voice came through the comm with barely controlled disbelief. Commander, the energy requirements for that kind of pulse would require us to drain our life support, artificial gravity, and most of our defensive systems. We'd be completely vulnerable. Only for about 30 seconds, Sarah replied. But in those 30 seconds, we're going to light up this system like the birth of a new star. Dr. Vasquez was frantically running calculations at her station, her fingers flying over holographic displays. The math is theoretically possible, but the synchronization would have to be perfect. Even a microsecond delay between ships could cause the pulse to collapse or create destructive interference patterns. Captain Thompson's weathered face appeared on the communication screen. Commander, my engineering teams are reporting they can rig our quantum drives to act as amplifiers. If we sync the pulse with a quantum field fluctuation, we might be able to reach every devourer in the system. Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar rush that came with impossible odds. How long do you need to set it up? 20 minutes, assuming nothing goes wrong. You have 15. The Zephyrians can't hold out much longer. Across the 3 human vessels, engineering teams worked with the desperate efficiency that had kept their species alive on a world that actively tried to kill them. They rerouted power conduits, recalibrated quantum field generators, and performed maintenance procedures that would have taken weeks under normal circumstances. Meanwhile, the battle for the Zephyrian city mind continued to rage. Sarah watched through the tactical display as more sections of the crystalline structure went dark. The ancient entity's communications were becoming increasingly fragmented as its consciousness was literally consumed. Commander, Torres called out, I'm detecting energy fluctuations from the asteroid field. More devourers are emerging, and these ones are larger than the others we've encountered. Sarah looked at the display and felt her blood chill. The new entities were easily the size of human battleships, their dark forms crackling with consumed energy from previous feeding frenzies. Ma'am, the Zephyrians are hailing us, reported Torres. The alien consciousness appeared on screen, its form now so dim it was barely visible. Commander Chen, we cannot wait much longer. Our core matrix is being directly assaulted. If it falls, the Devourers will have enough energy to tear holes between realities. How much time do we have? Minutes. Perhaps less, Sarah turned to Martinez. Chief, where are we on the pulse preparation? 10 more minutes, Commander. We're working as fast as we can, but if we rush the quantum field calibration, the whole system could collapse. Sarah made the decision that defined her species. When faced with impossible circumstances, humans didn't calculate odds. They acted. All ships emergency acceleration toward the Zephyrian city. We're going to get between those devourers and their target. The 3 human vessels surged forward, their engines pushed to maximum output. Behind them, space twisted as the quantum drives carved through reality itself. Ahead, a swarm of entities that existed to consume existence itself closed in on their prey. Commander, there are over 60 devourers between us and the Zephyrian city, Navigator Kim reported. They'll tear us apart before we can reach effective range. Then we'll have to make sure they're too busy feeding to notice us approaching, Sarah replied. All ships begin emergency reactor overload. Not the synchronized pulse, just raw energy output. Make ourselves the most attractive target in the system. The Prometheus began to glow as its fusion reactors poured energy into every system simultaneously. External sensors, shield generators, communication arrays. Even the lights in the corridors were fed massive amounts of power. The ship became a beacon that blazed across multiple energy spectrums. The effect was immediate. Every devourer in the vicinity turned toward the human ships like predators scenting blood. They abandoned their assault on the Zephyrian city and converged on the new source of energy. They're taking the bait, reported Parks. All hostiles are moving to intercept. Sarah watched the tactical display as dozens of dark entities flowed through space toward her ships. Good. The hungrier they are, the more vulnerable they'll be to overload. Martinez, how much longer? 5 minutes for the pulse system, Commander. You have 3. The first wave of devourers reached the human formation and space exploded into chaos. Reality warped as the entities began feeding on the ship's energy output. The Prometheus shuddered as its shields were consumed at the quantum level, not destroyed but negated from existence. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12, reported damage control. Emergency bulkheads are holding, but we're losing atmosphere. Sarah gripped her command chair as the ship bucked like a wounded animal. Through the viewports, she could see the devourers pressing closer, their dark forms becoming more solid as they gorged themselves on human technology. Commander, the larger entities from the asteroid field are approaching, Torres called out. Estimated contact in 2 minutes. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console with wild eyes. Commander, the energy readings from those larger devourers are off the scale. They're not just entities, they're some kind of queen specimens. If they reach us before the pulse is ready, they won't, Sarah said with absolute certainty, because we're not going to give them the chance. All ships, emergency burn toward the center of the devourer swarm. Maximum engine output. The 3 human vessels plunged deeper into the chaos, their hulls groaning under the assault of entities that existed to unmake reality itself. Emergency klaxons wailed as systems failed one by one, but the ships continued their desperate charge. Martinez, please tell me you have good news. Pulse system is online, Commander. Quantum field generators are synchronized across all 3 ships. But we only get one shot at this. If it doesn't work, it'll work, Sarah said. It has to work. Because that's what humans do. We find a way to win when winning should be impossible. The massive devourer queens reached the formation just as Martinez announced the pulse system was ready. Sarah could see them clearly now. Entities so large they seemed to bend space around themselves simply by existing. Their presence made the vacuum itself scream. All ships, prepare for synchronized pulse on my mark. Remember, this is for every thinking being in our reality. Make it count. Sarah watched the tactical display one last time, seeing the swarm of devourers clustered around her ships like antibodies around an infection. Nearly 70 entities, including the massive queens, all feeding frantically on human technology. They were all exactly where she wanted them. Fire. The universe held its breath. For exactly 1.7 seconds, the 3 human ships became something more than metal and technology. They became conduits for energy that transcended physical laws, channels for the kind of power that existed at the moment of cosmic creation. The synchronized pulse erupted from the human fleet like the birth cry of a new star. Energy cascaded through dimensions that had no names, washing over the devourer swarm in waves that struck at the fundamental level of existence itself. The effect was immediate and devastating. The smaller devourers simply ceased to exist, their forms unable to process the massive energy influx. They didn't explode or disintegrate. They were retroactively edited from reality, leaving behind spaces where something had once been but no longer was. The larger entities lasted longer, their forms stretching across multiple dimensions as they tried desperately to contain the energy that poured into them. Sarah watched through sensors that were probably not designed to observe what she was seeing. As the devourers twisted themselves into impossible configurations, their dark forms becoming increasingly translucent. But it was the queens that provided the most spectacular display. The massive entities expanded like cosmic balloons, their forms growing larger and larger as they attempted to contain energy, equivalent to the output of a small sun. They became visible in spectrums that human eyes couldn't normally perceive, their death throes painting space in colors that had no names. Then they reached their breaking point. The first queen simply unraveled, her form coming apart like a tapestry with its threads pulled. The second tried to expel the excess energy, and succeeded only in creating a brief wormhole that folded in on itself with a sound like reality tearing. The third queen lasted the longest, her ancient form somehow managing to partially contain the energy pulse. For a moment, Sarah thought the entity might actually survive. Then the Queen made a sound that echoed through dimensions, a cry of something that might have been surprise, and collapsed into a point of absolute darkness before vanishing entirely. "All hostiles eliminated," reported Parks in a voice filled with disbelief. "Commander, they're all gone. Every single one." The bridge erupted in cheers, but Sarah was already focused on the next crisis. The energy pulse had drained their ships to critical levels. Life support was running on emergency power. Artificial gravity was fluctuating, and half their systems were offline. "Damage report from all ships," she ordered. Captain Rodriguez appeared on the communication screen, his face streaked with sweat and grime. "Retribution took heavy damage during the feeding frenzy, but we're still spaceworthy. 20% of our systems are offline, and we've lost 2 fighter squadrons." Captain Thompson looked even worse. "New Geneva is barely holding together, Commander. We've got hull breaches on 6 decks and our main reactor is scrammed, but we're alive." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console with wonder in her eyes. "Commander, the energy readings from the Zephyrian city are stabilizing. The pulse didn't affect them because their crystalline matrix was designed to channel energy, not consume it." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Torres, open a channel to the Zephyrians." The alien consciousness appeared on screen, but this time its form was brighter, more coherent. "Commander Chen, we owe you a debt that spans multiple realities. Your species has done something that we thought impossible. You have destroyed entities that exist to unmake existence itself." "That's what we do," Sarah replied simply. "We help people who need help." The Zephyrians seemed to consider this for a long moment. "Your species' designation as Deathworlders is more accurate than most civilizations realize. You do not merely survive hostile environments. You thrive in them. You face impossibility and make it possible through determination alone." Sarah was about to respond when Dr. Vasquez suddenly called out in alarm. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the system. The destruction of so many devourers has created instabilities in local spacetime." Navigator Kim confirmed her readings. "The gravitational anomalies are intensifying. The star itself is beginning to destabilize." Sarah felt her heart sink. They had won the battle, but their victory might have doomed the entire system. "How long do we have?" "At current rate of deterioration, perhaps 6 hours before the star undergoes catastrophic collapse," reported Dr. Vasquez. The Zephyrian consciousness flickered with what might have been resignation. This outcome was anticipated. The Devourer's presence had already destabilized local reality. Their destruction merely accelerated the process. "There has to be something we can do," Sarah said. "We didn't save you just to watch you die in a stellar collapse." The alien entity's form brightened slightly, displaying what Sarah had learned to recognize as curiosity. "There is one possibility, though it would require a level of trust between our species that has no precedent." "What kind of possibility?" "We could merge our technology with yours temporarily. Our crystalline matrix has the ability to channel and redirect massive amounts of energy. Combined with your ship's quantum drives, we might be able to create a controlled wormhole large enough to evacuate this system." Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the comm. "Commander, our quantum drives are barely functional after that energy pulse. Even if we could create a wormhole, the power requirements would be enormous." Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were exhausted, their ships were damaged, and they were being asked to attempt something that had never been tried before. It was exactly the kind of challenge that defined humanity. "What would this merger involve?" she asked the Zephyrian. "We would need to integrate parts of our consciousness directly into your ship systems. Your crew would retain control, but our processing power would be available to handle the complex calculations required for stable wormhole formation." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her console with excitement overriding exhaustion. "Commander, the theoretical implications are staggering. A merger between human technology and Zephyrian consciousness could revolutionize space travel." "There are risks," the alien entity continued. "The process has never been attempted with your species. There could be unforeseen consequences to both our consciousnesses." Sarah made the decision with the same certainty that had carried her through the battle. "We'll do it." "What do you need from us?" "Direct physical contact between your ships and our city mind. We will need to extend crystalline appendages to interface with your quantum drives and computer systems." Sarah turned to her crew. "You heard the plan. We're going to save an entire system by trying something that's never been done before. Any objections?" Lieutenant Torres grinned despite his exhaustion. Ma'am, if we were the kind of people who worried about impossible odds, we never would have left Earth in the first place. Sarah nodded, feeling pride in her species swell in her chest. All ships prepare for direct interface with the Zephyrian city mind. We're going to punch a hole through space-time itself and get everyone out of here. The 3 human vessels moved toward the crystalline structure, their damaged hulls reflecting the alien light. Behind them, the system's star continued its accelerating collapse, its surface now crawling with energy discharges that defied physics. They had minutes to save billions of ancient minds and prove once again that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their technology. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat. The moment of contact changed everything. Sarah felt it the instant the Zephyrian crystalline appendages made physical connection with the Prometheus. A presence touched her mind, vast and ancient beyond human comprehension, yet somehow gentle in its approach. Around her, the bridge crew gasped as alien thoughts whispered at the edges of their consciousness. "Integration beginning," reported Dr. Vasquez, her voice filled with wonder. "Commander, the Zephyrian consciousness is interfacing with our computer systems, but it's also making contact with our minds. I can feel their knowledge, their memories spanning millions of years." Sarah gritted her teeth as information flooded her awareness. She saw the birth of civilizations, the death of stars, mathematical concepts that her human brain wasn't designed to process. But underneath it all, she felt something familiar: determination. The Zephyrians might have transcended physical form, but they still possessed the fundamental drive to survive that connected all sentient life. "Status report from all ships," she managed to say through the mental storm. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the comm, strained but functional. "Retribution is fully integrated. My engineering teams are reporting that our quantum drive output has increased by 800%. Commander, I can feel their minds working through our systems. It's incredible." Captain Thompson sounded almost drugged with amazement. "New Geneva confirms integration complete. Our computers are processing calculations at rates that should be impossible. The Zephyrians are using our quantum cores to model the entire system's gravitational matrix in real time." Dr. Vasquez suddenly straightened at her console, her eyes wide with understanding. "Commander, the wormhole formation process is more complex than we imagined. We're not just creating a tunnel through space. We're creating a temporary bridge between realities. The exit point will be in normal space, outside the gravitational influence of the collapsing star." Sarah felt alien knowledge settling into her mind like puzzle pieces finding their proper places. The Zephyrians were sharing their understanding of dimensional physics, concepts that human science had only theorized about. She could see the mathematical structure of the wormhole they needed to create, a stable tunnel that would allow the crystalline city mind to escape before the star's final collapse. "How long do we have?" she asked. Navigator Kim consulted displays that now showed readings in both human and Zephyrian notation. "Stellar collapse will begin in 17 minutes. But Commander, the wormhole formation will take nearly 20 minutes to stabilize." Sarah felt her stomach drop. They were 3 minutes short. And in stellar physics, 3 minutes might as well be 3 centuries. "Can we accelerate the process?" The Zephyrian consciousness responded directly into her mind, its thoughts carrying weight and age beyond measure. "There is a possibility, but it would require your ships to channel more energy than they were designed to handle. The risk of catastrophic failure would be significant." Define significant. Approximately 60% chance of total system failure resulting in the destruction of all 3 vessels. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They had already pushed their ships beyond their design limits, survived an encounter with entities that existed to unmake reality, and now they were being asked to risk everything one more time. Lieutenant Torres spoke up from his station. "Commander, if we don't try, the Zephyrians die anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to save them." Chief Engineer Martinez's voice crackled through the comm. "Ma'am, the integration with the Zephyrian technology has given us capabilities we never had before. If we're going to risk everything, now's the time to do it." Sarah made the decision that would define the next chapter of human-alien relations. "All ships prepare for emergency overload of all systems. We're going to create that wormhole in 14 minutes instead of 20. The effect was immediate. Throughout the 3 human vessels, every system was pushed far beyond its safety margins. Fusion reactors that had already been strained to their limits poured energy into quantum drives that began to reshape space itself. But this time, they weren't working alone. The Zephyrian consciousness guided the process, their ancient minds calculating probability matrices and quantum field fluctuations faster than any computer. Sarah could feel their presence in every system, watching over her crew like guardian angels made of pure thought. Wormhole formation beginning, reported Dr. Vasquez. Energy output is stable, but we're already exceeding safety parameters on 17 different systems. Through the viewports, Sarah could see space itself beginning to change. Reality twisted around a point roughly 10,000 kilometers from the Zephyrian city mind, creating a spiral of light and shadow that hurt to look at directly. Commander, the star's beginning its final collapse. Sequence, called out Kim. Gravitational. Waves are destabilizing local. Space. Sarah felt the alien presence in her mind grow, stronger as the Zephyrians poured more of their consciousness into maintaining the wormhole's stability. She could sense their determination, their absolute refusal to let the human ships fail after they had risked so much. How much longer? She asked. 8 more minutes for minimum stable formation, reported Dr. Vasquez. But Commander, I'm detecting stress fractures in the Prometheus's hull. The energy overload is tearing us apart. Around the bridge, sparks flew from overloaded consoles. Emergency lighting flickered as power systems struggled to handle loads they were never designed for. But the ship held together through a combination of human engineering and sheer stubborn determination. Captain Rodriguez appeared on the screen, his face grim. Retribution has lost main power to 3 decks. We're running on emergency systems, but we're still in the fight. New Geneva is holding together barely, reported Captain Thompson. But Commander, if we have to maintain this energy output much longer, we're going to lose hull integrity completely. Sarah felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. She was asking her crews to die for an alien species they had barely met, risking 3 ships and 2,000 lives for beings of pure energy who existed beyond physical reality. But that was what made humans special in the galaxy. They didn't calculate the worth of lives saved against lives risked. When people needed help, humans helped. It was that simple and that complicated. All ships maintain energy output. We finish this mission. The star's collapse accelerated, sending waves of gravitational distortion throughout the system. The Prometheus shuddered as space-time itself warped around them. But the wormhole continued to grow, its entrance now large enough for the Zephyrian city mind to pass through. Commander, Dr. Vasquez called out, the Zephyrians are asking if they should begin their evacuation now. Sarah looked at the tactical display, calculating distances and energy requirements with alien mathematics that felt natural in her enhanced mind. Not yet. The exit point isn't stable enough. If they enter the wormhole now, they could be scattered across multiple realities. 5 more minutes, reported Martinez. 5 more minutes and we'll have a stable transit corridor. But 5 minutes was time they didn't have. The star's surface was already beginning to collapse inward, and the gravitational effects were tearing apart the asteroid field that surrounded the system. Sarah felt the Zephyrian consciousness touch her mind with something that felt like gratitude mixed with absolute determination. Commander Chen, the alien entity, spoke through their mental link. Your species has already given us more than we had any right to expect. We will not allow your sacrifice to be in vain. Suddenly, the energy readings from the crystalline city mind spiked dramatically. The Zephyrians were feeding their own consciousness directly into the wormhole formation, using their transcended existence as raw material for dimensional manipulation. They're accelerating the process, breathed Dr. Vasquez. The Zephyrians are sacrificing parts of their collective consciousness to stabilize the wormhole ahead of schedule. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks as she realized what the ancient beings were doing. They were giving up portions of their immortal existence to save the humans who had come to rescue them. Wormhole stable, reported Kim. Transit window is open. The crystalline city mind began to move, its massive form heading toward the swirling portal that led to safety. As it passed through, Sarah felt the Zephyrian presence in her mind begin to fade, but not before leaving behind something precious: knowledge, understanding, and a friendship that would span the stars. The Zephyrian city mind disappeared through the wormhole just as the star began its final death spiral. Sarah felt the alien presence fade from her consciousness like a warm hand pulling away. But the knowledge they had shared remained, mathematical concepts that would advance human science by centuries, an understanding of dimensional physics that opened doorways to technologies beyond imagination, and most importantly, the memory of minds so ancient and wise that they made human civilization seem like a brief candle flame. All ships, emergency transit through the wormhole now, Sarah commanded as gravitational waves from the collapsing star began tearing apart what remained of the planetary system. The Prometheus led the way, its damaged hull groaning under the stress of dimensional transition. Sarah gripped her command chair as space folded around them, reality bending in ways that made her stomach lurch and her vision blur. Through the chaos, she could hear her crew calling out system statuses and damage reports. Hull integrity at 30%, reported damage control. We're losing atmosphere on multiple decks. Quantum drive efficiency dropping rapidly, called out Chief Engineer Martinez. Whatever the Zephyrians did to our systems, the effects are wearing off fast. Sarah watched the tactical display as the Retribution followed them through the dimensional tunnel. Captain Rodriguez's ship was trailing debris, its hull cracked like a broken egg. But it was still moving under its own power. The New Geneva brought up the rear, and Sarah's heart clenched as she saw the state of Thompson's vessel. Entire sections were dark, and the ship was venting atmosphere from dozens of hull breaches. But it was still alive, still fighting. Transit complete, announced Navigator Kim as normal space reasserted itself around the human fleet. We're in the Proxima Centauri system, approximately 40 light-years from the Kepler 442 system. Behind them, the wormhole collapsed with a flash of light that illuminated half the system. Where it had been, there was now only empty space and the distant glow of stars. Status of the Zephyrian city mind? Sarah asked. Dr. Vasquez consulted her readings and relief flooded her face. They're there, Commander. Damaged but intact. I'm reading massive energy signatures from their crystalline structure. They survived the transition. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Open a channel to the Zephyrians. The alien consciousness appeared on the main screen, its form noticeably dimmer than when they had first made contact. The entity had sacrificed much of itself to ensure their escape, and the cost was visible. Commander Chen, the being spoke, its voice carrying harmonics of exhaustion and profound gratitude. Your species has accomplished something that we will remember for the remainder of our existence, however long that may be. How badly are you damaged? Sarah asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. We lost approximately 30% of our collective consciousness during the escape process. Entire archives of knowledge spanning millions of years were sacrificed to stabilize the dimensional transit. But we live, and that is due entirely to your intervention. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were exhausted. Their ships were barely holding together, and they had just participated in something that would change the relationship between humanity and the galaxy forever. What will you do now? She asked. The Zephyrian's form flickered with what might have been contemplation. We must rebuild, Commander, but we will not forget the debt we owe to your species. The knowledge we shared with you during our mental connection is yours to keep. Use it wisely. Lieutenant Torres suddenly looked up from his console with excitement. Commander, I'm receiving priority transmissions from Fleet Command. They want a full report on our mission status. Sarah almost laughed. How do you explain to headquarters that you just saved an ancient alien civilization from entities that existed to unmake reality itself? How do you describe a battle fought with pure energy against enemies from outside normal spacetime? Tell them we responded to a distress call and provided assistance to a stranded alien vessel, she said. Full details to follow in our written report. Captain Rodriguez appeared on the communication screen, his face streaked with sweat and grime but showing a grin that stretched from ear to ear. Commander, my engineering teams are reporting some incredible discoveries in our integrated systems. The Zephyrians' technology has enhanced our capabilities in ways we're only beginning to understand. Captain Thompson looked exhausted but satisfied. Same here. New Geneva's computers are processing data at rates that should be impossible. We've gained access to scientific principles that human science won't discover on its own for centuries. Dr. Vasquez was practically bouncing with excitement at her station. Commander, the implications of what we've learned are staggering. Faster than light communication, advanced dimensional manipulation, energy sources that could power entire civilizations. The Zephyrians have given us a technological leap that will transform human space exploration. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction settle into her bones. They had gone into the unknown to answer a distress call, faced impossible odds against enemies that shouldn't exist, and emerged not just victorious but fundamentally changed as a species. The Zephyrian consciousness spoke once more, its voice carrying the weight of countless eons. "Commander, before we part ways, there is something you should know. The Devourers you destroyed were not the only ones of their kind. They exist in the spaces between realities, and they will find other ways into our universe." Sarah felt her jaw clench. "Are you saying this isn't over?" "This particular threat has been eliminated, but others will come. However, your species has proven something that no other civilization in our experience has demonstrated. Humans do not simply defend themselves. They defend others. You risked everything to save us, and that action has been noted by forces throughout the galaxy." The alien entity paused, its form brightening slightly. "Word of your actions today will spread among the ancient civilizations. Humanity will no longer be seen simply as aggressive Deathworlders. You will be known as protectors, defenders of those who cannot defend themselves." Sarah thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who continued to struggle and thrive on a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. She thought about the expansion into space, the colonies that pushed the boundaries of human endurance, and the crews who ventured into the unknown because someone had to do it. "That's what we do," she said simply. "When people need help, we help them. Doesn't matter if they're human or alien, flesh and blood or pure energy. If someone sends out a distress call, humans will answer." The Zephyrian consciousness seemed to consider this for a long moment. "Your species' designation as Deathworlders has taken on new meaning today. You are indeed children of death, but you use that heritage to preserve life rather than destroy it. The galaxy is fortunate to have humanity among its defenders." As the communication ended and the crystalline city mind began its journey to whatever refuge the Zephyrians would build for themselves, Sarah looked out at the stars through the bridge viewports. Somewhere among those points of light, other civilizations were probably facing their own impossible challenges. And when they sent out their distress calls, they would know that humanity would answer. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his console with a weary but satisfied expression. "Commander, Fleet Command is requesting our return to Earth for debriefing. They're also asking about the alien technology we've apparently acquired." Sarah nodded, already composing her report in her mind. It would be a long journey home, time enough to process everything they had experienced and prepare for the questions that would follow. "Set course for Earth, Navigator. It's time to go home." As the three battered human ships turned toward the distant light of Sol, Sarah felt a deep pride in her species. They had faced the impossible and made it possible through nothing more than determination and an absolute refusal to abandon people in need. The galaxy had taken notice of humanity before because they were dangerous. Predators from a death world. Now they would be known for something else entirely, as the species that answered distress calls no matter what the odds. It was a reputation that humanity would carry proudly among the stars.